just do that to my girl, Claudia. Welcome in to my review of episode 5 of Interview with the Vampire. This one really took me for a spin, and not in a good way. I feel like I have more emotions about this episode than intellectual things to discuss in it. They took two great and powerful liberties with this episode compared to the source material, which I'm going to discuss. I'm not necessarily upset. The story is definitely mutating into something very different from the original book series, but both can be loved in their own way. There is something upsetting. Now, before I get into it, I would love it if you've subscribed to this channel. Kill me like one of your French girls needs you. We can only do this with horror fans like you and me. Getting into it. Things are getting horrible at the house as Claudia decides to go on her own. We've seen her go from a young girl into a woman, although physically not growing up. And of course it gets to this point where she wants to be on her own. The typical upset teenager who wants to run away from her parents, and she does that, and I was all for it. I was literally cheering her on. I said, you go, girl. What adventures and mischief can she get into now? And she had kind of like a stupid scam going during this time. We got to see Loyola University back in the olden days, and my understanding is they actually did film on campus. They just made it look a little more old-timey. The problem is that she doesn't have school ID, and if she's making students disappear from the library, eventually they're gonna question the 14-year-old girl who's always reading in that library. It wasn't the smartest scam going, but it was interesting for a time being. Now, she eventually gets accosted verbally by some sort of frat boy, pardon my French, and he doesn't like her there because of her race. It is clearly a very racial thing going on here, and it gets interrupted by another telepath. And of course, telepath in this world means that it is a vampire named Bruce. And of course, the story takes place in the 20s, maybe the 30s. So of course, he's an old-time biker. He's a proto-biker to what a Hell's Angel might be. And he seems like a pretty happening guy. She finally, in this short time, has found a vampire. Now, in the original books, her and Louis search the world. They travel the world looking for vampires, and it takes them almost forever to find them because that's how well the vampires hide. They don't want to be found, even by other vampires sometimes. But while they're hanging out, the story takes a mean turn. Now, everything I'm about to say is something that they have implied to. They never outright say it, but it is my belief, and I think this is the common thing because everyone I've ever discussed this with agrees with me, that it would appear that Claudia was assaulted by Bruce. Assaulted in a very bad way. Now, this is the problem. They added sexuality to the vampires. Now, in Anne Rice's novels, there was sexuality without sex, meaning they like to cuddle and touch each other and drink each other's blood, but there was nothing what we consider sex. The urge to procreate, or therefore to have genital urges, is completely gone from these vampires. It's more about blood and an emotional connection. And then it didn't matter what your sexuality was in your mortal life, you just loved who you loved because you looked at everything beautifully in your unlife. However, the story early on added sexuality to it, like actual sexuality, where people are hooking up and getting with each other. And that being said, they now put a salacious, disgusting element to it. Because a character, or at least a vampire, in Anne Rice's novels would have never been attacked like that. And now they have. But they not only just did that to a vampire, which wouldn't happen in normal Anne Ricedom, it happened to Claudia. Now, of course, in the original novels, only a monster would write that in because she was a little girl in those novels. But even this one, a teenage Claudia, it's really disheartening and disgusting to see. I understand that the writers needed to create a feel that she had to learn that the world was a cold, dark place, and there had to be a reason why a girl from an abused home and a broken home would return to it if she's already run away. Freedom. I get it. I think they could have gone the angle of loneliness or something else, but why did they have to go down that angle? Even in the story, Louis doesn't want those pages read by Daniel because it would be too horrific for him to relive, and also he doesn't want that kind of exploitative information out. I feel disgusted that the character Claudia is being exploited in this way for this television show. Now, I know I'm a little uptight, and I'm sure you all love it, and at the time of watching it, I was very upset with the episode and very upset with the series. I have since gotten over it. I will continue my reviews, and I still love the show. I just do not agree with the writers doing this. I think it was a huge mistake. Now, she returns just in time to see Louis look at his own grave, and that his sister made out for him, and his sister finally says she wants nothing to do with his demonic ass. And Claudia says blatantly in the narration, I realize why I was created. I was created to be Louis' new sister. Now, in the novels, it's clear, and I feel even in the show, you're not anyone's sister. You're their daughter. You were there to put a band-aid on a broken marriage, and I actually think Daniel almost phrased it almost exactly like that. It was fascinating. But it's funny that they so blatantly say that. I hope this isn't the last we see of Louis' sister, because it kind of feels like she just kind of melted away from the story. We lost her. She's just gone. Home, and she returns home, and there's this kind of reconnection. And then they do the second thing of this episode that upset me to my core. And I will say, in terms of like production, this was done beautifully, absolutely beautifully done. Special effects were on point. The feeling and the emotion was there. But once again, not something that would happen in the books. In the books, Lestat abused them emotionally because of his evil silver tongue. He was not only a master of the piano, he had such a silver tongue, he could say the slightest thing to upset anybody. He could goad you by saying the right, he knew what buttons to push. And a lot of times that makes it worse. However, in this series, they decide to make him actually a physical abuser. There is a supernatural smackdown where Lestat is beating Louis within an inch of his life. They're destroying the house. Everything is being tossed over. It was upsetting, and I think in terms of direction-wise, it was done great. You know, little Claudia runs away. She runs upstairs, and there's a sign of her face as she listens to Louis being beaten and brutalized, and it just is... It encapsulates the fear that a child has. There is nothing they can do when physical violence is happening in the next room. And I felt her pain, and I was feeling the whole scene a lot. And then at the end of this brutal scene, he flies him up into the air, and he says something that's really clever. My good friend Holdup pointed this out to me. He pointed out that Louis says what Lestat says what all abusers say. He says, just tell me you don't love me, and we can just leave it at that. Basically turning the tables and making it seem like all of this is Louis' fault, not Lestat's. It's not Lestat's fault that he beat him. It's Louis' because he didn't love him correctly. That was very powerful. And then comes the weird dropping him from the sky. It took a new level of supernatural hijinks in this episode. Amazing episode. Very different from the source material. And it took me a lot to get over it. I was actually kind of upset at the show. I actually tweeted, not rudely, but I said I did not agree with what you did with the characters at AMC, you know. I'm just so much of an Anne Rice fan. But of course, she put her signature on this bad boy. And I believe in the honesty of that. I believe in the sincerity. She agreed with these kind of changes, and it will be interesting where it goes on further. The real question is, what did you, my ghouls and ghosts, think of this episode? Do you think they went too far by making Lestat an actual physical abuser? And what did you think about the alterations to Claudia's character? Too far? Please let me know down in the comments. And remember to smash that like button and keep tuning in to kill me like one of your French girls. Until next time, ta-ta.